Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is part 2 of What If Naruto was in King of Fighters. If you guys enjoyed this what if, then comment, like and subscribe. Let's go. Also the video goal is 10 likes, so let me know that you're interested in the series and you want the next part. Then go ahead and check out the other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave. Also share the video with your friends and link in the description. So let's go. Naruto stood in the center of the battlefield, his mind sharp and focused. He had fought many opponents in his time, but none like this. The woman before him, Eliza, radiated an ominous energy that sent a chill down his spine. Her delicate, seemingly fragile appearance contrasted sharply with the dark power that flowed through her. Her claws were still covered in the blood she had savored, her red eyes glowing with a predatory gleam that promised danger. King, who had been observing from the sidelines, couldn't remain passive any longer. She stepped forward, her body poised for action. "Naruto, she is a vampire. Don't let her catch you," King warned, her voice steady and firm despite the tension in the air. With a swift motion, King's leg snapped, releasing cutting ki blades that shot toward Eliza with deadly precision. The attack, capable of slicing through metal with ease, should have overwhelmed any ordinary opponent. But Eliza's reaction was nothing short of astounding. Her hands, delicate and unassuming, moved with a fluid grace to intercept the attack. The ki blades, which would have easily cleaved through anything in their path, were stopped with a mere slap of her palm. The force of the block sent the ki blades careening back toward King. Already prepared for this, King leapt away, narrowly avoiding the deadly projectiles. The blast of ki that followed, however, was too powerful. It obliterated the surroundings, collapsing the building they stood near as it carved through the concrete and steel with ease. Eliza's eyes glinted with amusement as she observed the destruction. Her senses seemed to come alive with the power of the battle. She could feel the blood pumping through Naruto's veins, the power of his spiritual energy. It was intoxicating. She had been waiting for this moment for centuries. Her hunger, once dulled by her prolonged slumber, had awakened in full force. Eliza's thoughts raced as memories of her long, deep sleep surfaced. She had once been a powerful vampire, feared and revered in her dark world. However, when she found herself trapped in the human world, her powers had begun to fade. She had tried to restore herself by feeding on the blood of others, but it wasn't enough. What she needed was the blood of someone with a powerful spiritual force, something that could bring her back to her former glory. But such a person seemed impossible to find, until now. Naruto, with his boundless energy and formidable presence, was exactly what she had been searching for. "Finally, I have found you," Eliza purred, her voice thick with longing as her eyes fixed on Naruto with hungry intensity. Naruto, sensing the threat in her gaze, couldn't help but respond with his usual playful nature. "Why don't you introduce yourself first before looking at me like that? My maiden heart feels very shy now." He chuckled, but inside, he was calculating his next move. He had dealt with powerful enemies before, but this was different. Eliza's power was unlike anything he had encountered. "My name is Eliza," she replied, her tone languid and seductive. "And you, my dear, look like a treat. Why don't you let me have a drink? You're really too delicious. I've never come across such a fine dish in my long life." A shiver ran down Naruto's spine as he watched her eyes glimmer with an almost childlike anticipation. "What are you?" he asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and caution. "I am a vampire," Eliza answered, her words slow and deliberate, as if savoring the very idea of her existence. She flashed a wicked grin before she moved, faster than anyone could track, her form blurring as she shot toward Naruto. The ground beneath her cracked and shattered from the force of her speed, and the air around her exploded in a sonic boom. It was clear that Eliza was no ordinary vampire. She was a force to be reckoned with, and her speed alone was enough to overwhelm anyone in her path. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he saw the attack coming. His instincts kicked in immediately. With a quick hand sign, he summoned his clones to shield the others from the shockwave of Eliza's movements. The clones moved quickly, grabbing King, Poison, and the others, pulling them to safety as the ground continued to rumble beneath them. "Interesting ability," Eliza murmured, her voice filled with curiosity as she watched Naruto's clones swiftly evacuate the bystanders. Her predatory gaze never wavered from him, and she was clearly excited by the challenge he presented. King, hovering nearby, called out, "Naruto, do you need help?" Poison, ever the opportunist, also spoke up, offering her assistance. "Boss, we can help out if you need." Naruto shook his head, his expression calm and determined. "I can handle it. You guys get to safety, and I'll meet you later." His clones continued to move the others away from the battlefield, but Naruto remained, his attention fixed solely on Eliza. The atmosphere around them crackled with tension as both combatants sized each other up. Eliza, with her vampiric strength, speed, and predatory instincts, and Naruto, with his unique blend of ninja techniques, chakra, and battle-hardened skill. The fight had only just begun, and already it was clear that this would be a battle like no other. Eliza's grip on Naruto tightened, her arms like iron bands, yet her touch was surprisingly gentle. She spoke with a hint of both hunger and allure, her words dripping with desire. "Are you finished?" Naruto, breathless but not defeated, managed a smile. "Yes, thanks for obliging to my request." Her smile widened, but there was something almost predatory in it. "I do not want weaklings to ruin my meal." In an instant, her right leg shot up, aiming for his chin with a powerful kick. Naruto barely had time to react as she caught his hands in hers, but he quickly countered with his own leg, blocking her attack. The sheer force of the impact sent tremors across Naruto's body, his muscles straining under the power of her kick. It was immediately clear to him that her physical strength surpassed his, even with his chakra-enhanced body. Her base power was higher, and with the dark energy she wielded, the difference was magnified. Naruto, however, was no stranger to fighting opponents with higher stats. This wasn't a new challenge for him, even if the fight was more difficult than most. Eliza's movements were swift and fluid, and before Naruto could fully regain his balance, she lunged forward with a headbutt. He quickly braced himself, but she was faster. Pulling back, she ensnared him in a bear hug, her grip tightening around him like a vice. The force of it made Naruto's vision blur for a moment, but he refused to show weakness. Both of them crashed to the ground, Eliza pinning Naruto beneath her. Her body was a weight pressing down on him, but there was something almost paradoxical about the situation. Her closeness, her scent, everything about her was alluring. Yet, her strength was overwhelming. As she mounted him, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that was both beautiful and haunting. "What are you going to do?" she purred, her voice soft yet filled with dangerous intent. Naruto, slightly breathless, stared into her eyes. "Are you not scared that I was planning to kill you?" she asked with a teasing smile, clearly enjoying their interaction. "No, I don't feel your desire to kill," Naruto replied, maintaining a calm expression despite the intense pressure of her hold. Eliza's smile faltered slightly, but her gaze remained fixed on him. "I need you alive. There is no other person who can give me what you have. So let's come to an agreement," she said sweetly. "I don't want your taste to be ruined by despair. I'll let you live, and you'll feed me. Is that clear?" Her words, spoken with such charm, made Naruto hesitate for a moment. She looked so innocent in her expression, but there was a darkness lurking beneath that beauty. The aura of power she exuded was unmistakable. Despite her sweet demeanor, Naruto couldn't ignore the danger she posed. She was not just a vampire, she was a predator, and he was her prey. But before he could even react, Eliza's legs coiled around him like a snake, and in an instant, she had him trapped. She applied more pressure, pushing his head into a chokehold while her legs secured his arms. His body was pinned, and with alarming speed, she sank her fangs into his neck, drawing blood. Naruto's immediate reaction was surprise. He had expected pain, but instead, he felt a strange wave of pleasure coursing through him. It was disorienting, his body wanted to resist, but the sensation was almost overwhelming. Her dark energy seeped into him, clouding his mind, slowing his movements. "Damn, how stupid of me," Naruto berated himself silently. He had forgotten the importance of eye abilities, thinking they wouldn't apply in this new world. But Eliza's control over him, her ability to manipulate him with that aura, was too much to ignore. Naruto's body felt heavier as he fought against the pull of the vampire's influence. But despite the pleasure clouding his mind, he focused. "I will not give in," he thought, narrowing his focus. His chakra began to surge outward, forming a golden aura around him as he pushed Eliza off with sheer willpower. She was knocked back momentarily, giving Naruto enough time to summon clones to handle her while he regained his bearings. She's too strong physically, Naruto thought as he observed her, his clones immediately engaging her. Her combat skills are higher than mine when I'm alone, and even our speeds are now equal. I can barely reach Mach 4 in combat, and Mach 5 with acceleration at my peak. I need more than just speed to fight her. Naruto felt his mind racing. He had fought opponents stronger than him before, but Eliza was a different kind of challenge. She was skilled, fast, and powerful, more so than many enemies he had faced. He couldn't afford to take her lightly. Eliza, however, was enjoying the chase. Her red eyes gleamed with genuine desire, but Naruto could sense something else beneath her words. There was a certain vulnerability in her need for him, and yet it was hard to ignore the intensity of her hunger. "Why won't you consider my offer?" she asked again, her voice almost childlike. "I'm offering you my companionship. Isn't that an honor? I really need a drink, and I'd rather not fall asleep for who knows how long. Please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Naruto didn't respond immediately, considering his options. Should he restrain her? Should he flee? The battle was getting more intense by the second, and they were dangerously close to the city. A fight like this could cause irreparable damage if it continued unchecked. Instead of answering her, Naruto asked a question of his own, trying to probe deeper into her origins. "Do you know anyone with the ability to travel dimensions?" he asked, his voice steady. The way she spoke, the age-old knowledge in her eyes, it all pointed to a being far older than she appeared. Naruto had a feeling she was much more than just a mere vampire. Eliza paused, her eyes narrowing slightly as if considering his question. "Dimensional travel," she mused aloud. "Now, that's an interesting question. Why do you ask?" Her lips curled into a sly smile, but there was no malice in her tone, just curiosity. Eliza's expression softened into a smile, her lips curling up as she walked toward Naruto with an air of confidence and grace. "Dimensional travel, are you interested in such a thing? Then I can satisfy that desire," she purred, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "I know of two beings that can travel dimensions, but both are far beyond your capabilities and are quite dangerous." Her tone was light, almost teasing, as she walked closer to him, a sense of satisfaction radiating from her. She had just fed, and her energy had returned in full force, a vitality that made her feel more alive than ever. Naruto narrowed his eyes, sensing the shift in her demeanor. There was a hunger in her, not just for blood, but for something deeper, something that intrigued him. "I accept your request," he said, his voice steady. "But in return, help me when I'm ready for them." Eliza's smile widened, her eyes glinting with excitement. "Wonderful," she said, her voice like honey, smooth and inviting. "Then don't mind if I take another bite." With that, she clapped her hands and embraced Naruto, her body pressing against his as she sank her teeth into his neck once more. The contact, the sensation of her body so close to his, left Naruto momentarily stunned. Her curves pressed into him, and despite the situation, his body reacted to the proximity, a flush of warmth spreading through him. He could feel the sharpness of her fangs, but it wasn't the pain that overwhelmed him, it was the pleasure that accompanied her bite, the strange sensation that pulsed through his veins. Eliza, unfazed by the physical reaction she caused, ignored the hardness pressing into her stomach. She had experienced it before, and it was a mere byproduct of her nature. Many men would react this way, especially when touched by someone like her. Her fangs pulled away after a moment, and she gave him a soft, satisfied smile. "Thank you for the meal," she said, her voice thick with contentment. "Now, could you guide me to your quarters?" Naruto, still processing the encounter, nodded, feeling the effects of her blood-sucking fade quickly. His body, powerful as ever, was beginning to heal almost immediately. "I suppose it's time to leave then," he muttered to himself. Leading Eliza to a hotel nearby, Naruto broke into a room that was currently unoccupied. It was the quickest option, and his transformation jutsu made it easy to slip inside unnoticed. He set her down on the bed, the soft mattress creaking under her weight as she settled in, making herself comfortable. Eliza looked up at him with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You're a thief, huh? I presumed you were a hero," she commented, her tone teasing yet filled with curiosity. Naruto raised an eyebrow, perplexed by her comment. "Why would you think that?" he asked, his mind still distracted by the strange pull she had on him. Eliza sat up slightly, her eyes narrowing as she seemed to think carefully before answering. I can tell from the taste of your blood, she said, her voice thoughtful. It tastes of purity, with no impurity. Naruto paused, considering her words. I'm a shinobi, he replied, trying to brush off her insinuations. Stealing isn't much to us. Her eyes gleamed with understanding. I see, she murmured, her gaze softening. If you wish, you can leave now. I will find you tomorrow, or you can come back in the morning. Her tone had shifted to something more relaxed, more casual, as though she were allowing him a choice. Naruto stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. He had never encountered someone quite like her, dangerous, alluring, and paradoxical all at once. His thoughts were racing, and he was no longer sure what to make of her. I think I'll leave for now, he said finally, his voice tinged with uncertainty. He had to clear his head, to think through everything that had happened. As Eliza lay back on the bed, closing her eyes with a contented sigh, Naruto couldn't help but mutter under his breath, she didn't want to sleep, but now she's sleeping. Habits really are hard to break. Turning, he walked to the window, his mind still whirling with everything that had just transpired. With a quick hand seal, he activated the transformation jutsu, morphing into a bird and flying out of the window, leaving the room and Eliza behind for the night. His wings carried him through the cool night air, the city lights glinting below. He needed time to think, time to understand the enigmatic vampire and the dangerous path he might now be walking. King leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as the tension in the room simmered beneath the surface. The conversation between her and the other women carried a charged undercurrent, shaped by their shared but tumultuous histories. The small office, with its peeling wallpaper and outdated furnishings, was illuminated by the soft, flickering glow of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers, a sanctuary carved out from the chaos of the slums. Her mind was preoccupied with Naruto. She couldn't shake the gnawing concern for him. The thought of leaving him behind to fight Eliza, a foe whose aura reminded her of Rugal, one of the most fearsome enemies she had ever encountered, left her uneasy. It wasn't that she doubted Naruto's strength, his potential was undeniable, and he had already proven himself. But the sheer power Eliza exuded was a force that could turn even the most confident fighter's stomach. Roxy, lounging lazily on the sofa with one arm draped over the backrest, broke the silence first. Sis, what are we going to do now? Her voice was light, almost disinterested, a stark contrast to the tension King felt. King glanced at her, feeling a flicker of irritation at the younger woman's nonchalance. We're waiting for him, she said simply, though the weight in her voice betrayed her concern. Poison, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her chin propped on her hand, finally spoke up. We'll wait for the new boss, she said, her tone surprisingly calm. King's eyes narrowed, surprised by the remark. I thought you'd be the first one to bolt before he came back, she said, her tone laced with suspicion. Poison gave a dry laugh, flipping her middle finger casually in King's direction. I trust my taste in men, she said with a smirk, not missing a beat. King raised an eyebrow at that. I thought you only slept with simps. Here's a finger for you, Poison shot back, wiggling her extended digit for emphasis. As for my taste, I like strong men. If you didn't know, I even offered myself to Terry once. Of course, he turned me down, too much of a gentleman. And, well, I wasn't willing to risk getting my ass kicked by his bitch, as you so eloquently put it. King's lips thinned, her hands curling into fists on the desk. Watch your mouth before I throw you out into the streets, she warned, her voice steely. And remember, Mary is my friend. Now, tell me, what your plans are with Naruto. Poison shrugged, unfazed by King's growing agitation. Nothing. What do you expect us to do, huh? Control him. He could snap our pretty little necks like twigs if he wanted to. We're not fearless warriors like you, girl. Her smirk was as sharp as the words that left her lips. Roxy, who had been scrolling on her phone, finally chimed in, her voice tinged with annoyance. She's right, sis. Naruto's not someone we can mess with. And frankly, I don't see why you're so worked up. He'll be fine. Probably already won. King inhaled deeply, her mind flashing back to memories she had tried to bury. Images of her hometown, battles where she had faced impossible odds, friends nearly dying against foes that should have been insurmountable, it all bubbled to the surface. She slammed her hands on the desk, the sound echoing through the room. Do you even realize what kind of enemy we're talking about here? She snapped, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. This isn't just some thug or criminal. Eliza is, she's something else. If Naruto doesn't take her seriously, he could. He won't lose, Poison interrupted firmly, her gaze meeting King's with surprising conviction. You've seen him fight. He's not like anyone we've met before. If anything, Eliza's the one who should be worried. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the passage of time. 10 minutes had passed since the fight had begun. King clenched her fists, her heart heavy with doubt and anticipation. All she could do now was wait and hope that when Naruto returned, it wouldn't be with news that reminded her of the nightmares she'd spent years trying to forget. Naruto stepped into the room, his presence as casual as ever, despite the lingering tension from the earlier battle. I'm done, he said, brushing off some dust from his jacket as he entered through the window. The intrusion, however, was enough to spark King's reflexes. Without hesitation, she lashed out, sending a precise chi wave from her leg. The energy crackled through the air like a blade, aimed directly at Naruto. Whoa! Naruto exclaimed, instinctively raising his forearms enhanced with chakra to block the strike. The impact sent a dull ache through him, reminding him of King's impressive power. Without chakra reinforcement, he knew the attack could have easily injured him. King crossed her arms, her sharp gaze fixed on him. Next time, come through the door. People like us have to stay on guard, so reactions like that are necessary. Naruto grinned sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry about that. Old habits, you know. I'll try to remember next time. King gave a small sigh, glancing down at the stains on her carpet caused by the coffee she had spilled during the sudden commotion. Just be careful, she said, brushing off the moment. So, how did it go? The battle looked intense. Naruto settled into a chair, exhaling deeply. We fought to a compromise, and now we're friends. Turns out she had some valuable information I needed, so it worked out for the best. His tone was light, almost relieved. For the first time in a while, he felt like he had a clear path forward. King arched an eyebrow. Friends. With a demon. Can you trust her? I've dealt with creatures like that before, and let me tell you, none of them are trustworthy. Naruto's expression grew serious. I'm pretty good at reading people. She's not evil, not in the way you're thinking. She's just different. And right now, she needs me as much as I need her. King considered his words, the skepticism still evident in her posture. It's your choice, but I'd prefer it if you kept her far from my place. I've seen enough trouble from demons to last a lifetime. Naruto nodded, respecting her boundaries. Fair enough. By the way, have you ever heard of her? Her name is Eliza. King frowned, racking her memory for any mention of someone with such power. No, nothing comes to mind. What's her story? She's resting somewhere for now, Naruto replied, his stomach growling audibly. He scratched his head in embarrassment. Speaking of which, any chance I could get some food? I'm starving. King suppressed a small smile, her demeanor softening slightly. Wait here. She left the room and headed to arrange food for him. As she placed the order, she pulled out her phone and sent a message to Chizuru Kagura, the priestess of the Kagura clan. If anyone could provide insight into a powerful demon like Eliza, it was Chizuru. Her clan's mastery of sealing and divination was legendary, and King trusted her judgment implicitly. Her thoughts drifted momentarily to Chizuru's ongoing efforts to mediate between Kyo Kusanagi and Iori Yagami, two powerful but rival warriors whose clans were embroiled in ancient animosity. King couldn't help but draw parallels. The idea of making peace with someone as unpredictable as a demon felt equally daunting. 3 demons are already too much for this world. King's mind flitted to Akuma, Jin, and Kazuya, beings whose immense power and inner darkness had left indelible marks on the world. She shook her head, pushing those thoughts aside. I hope Chizuru's holding up. King sighed, feeling the weight of it all. Whatever the future held, she knew Naruto was a wildcard, someone who could either bring balance or chaos. All she could do now was wait and see where his path would lead. With King out of the room, Poison and Roxy exchanged glances, clearly expecting some kind of reaction or interaction from Naruto. However, his exhaustion had taken over. He barely acknowledged their presence, slumping onto a chair as if the weight of the day had finally caught up to him. I'll just make the seal now and call it a day. We can discuss everything else tomorrow, Naruto muttered, yawning. His voice was heavy, his mind burdened by the whirlwind of events. From waking up in a strange world to fighting formidable foes and navigating intense emotions, he was nearing his limit. Okay, the two women responded in unison, stepping forward. To his surprise and annoyance, both Poison and Roxy began shedding their clothes, their actions deliberate and teasing. Naruto's tired eyes widened for a moment before narrowing in disbelief. You didn't need to do that. Just your hands would have worked, he said, his gaze instinctively following the bold movements. All of this belongs to you now, boss, Poison said with a sly smile, placing a finger below her navel. I want the seal right here. And I want mine here, Roxy chimed in, her mischievous grin growing wider as she gestured toward the inside of her thigh. The two of them radiated a confidence born of their lifestyle, a mix of dominance and submission that they wielded as a form of flirtation and power play. Naruto exhaled sharply, his weariness momentarily overshadowed by their antics. They're testing me, he thought, noting the provocative tone in their voices and the way they leaned into the moment. Despite their efforts to stir him, Naruto remained steady. Not my first rodeo, ladies. He bit his finger, the metallic taste of blood briefly grounding him, and began inscribing seals on their chosen spots. Poison and Roxy took every opportunity to make it as uncomfortable as possible for him, moaning exaggeratedly with every brush of his finger. Naruto kept his face impassive, though a flicker of irritation crossed his mind. I might need to whip them into shape before they think they can keep testing my patience. After finishing the seals, Naruto sighed, ignoring their playful smirks. He gathered himself enough to eat the food King had arranged, grateful for the meal after such a taxing day. His stomach full, he finally allowed himself to collapse onto the bed. The fatigue he had been pushing aside hit him like a tidal wave, and he sank into the mattress. As he lay there, his mind wandered. I wonder how everyone is doing back home. How's Master? And Sasuke, what's he up to these days? A flood of memories and questions threatened to pull him deeper into a restless state. Sleep, he muttered aloud, forcing himself to block out the noise of his own thoughts. No need to think right now. In a foreign place, far from everything he knew, Naruto finally closed his eyes. For the first time since his arrival in this strange world, he let himself drift into unconsciousness, his mind and body succumbing to the rest they so desperately needed. In the heart of Africa, deep within the untamed jungles of a nation overrun by piracy and lawlessness, a powerful mercenary group known as the Ikari warriors had been contracted to restore order. Unlike the chaos they were sent to combat, the Ikari warriors operated with discipline and a strong moral compass. They were a force of balance, intervening in global conflicts to eliminate threats while refusing to take missions that harmed innocents. The pirates, a ruthless collection of killers and looters, had thrived unchecked for years. But they underestimated the forces they had drawn the ire of. The Ikari warriors, led by the stoic and deadly Leona Hydern, were no ordinary mercenaries. They were a storm that would obliterate the pirates' illusion of dominance. With precision and raw power, the three warriors, Leona, Ralph Jones, and Clark Still, tore through the pirates' ships and strongholds. Explosions rocked the jungle coastline as their coordinated assault dismantled the pirates' operations with brutal efficiency. Ralph, the most energetic of the group, laughed as he threw himself into the chaos, his powerful strikes reducing walls and enemies alike to rubble. Clark, the silent and calculating member, moved methodically, his every action measured and lethal. Leona, commanding and cold, led the charge, her unflinching resolve driving the team forward. As the dust settled, the Ikari warriors regrouped near the remnants of the pirates' last stronghold. The mission was almost complete, but Leona's sharp instincts told her to remain cautious. Captain, how long do we need to stay? Ralph asked, his tone respectful despite his usual boisterous personality. The tall, blonde mercenary adjusted his hat, his sharp blue eyes scanning the horizon. Until we're sure the mission is done, Leona replied coolly, biting into a ration bar. Her steely gaze flicked toward the horizon. We don't leave even one behind. Their conversation was interrupted by a deep voice that carried a mix of authority and amusement. Oh, it's good then that I'm here. The warriors immediately shifted into defensive stances, weapons at the ready, as a towering figure emerged from the jungle shadows. Mutiba Gizenga, the infamous blind mercenary, stepped forward with his usual casual swagger. His muscular frame was adorned with tribal tattoos, his whited-out eyes staring unerringly at them despite his blindness. Mutiba, Ralph growled, his fingers itching for action. What do you want? Mutiba raised his hands in mock surrender, his scarred lips curling into a smirk. Relax, Jones. I'm not here for a fight, unless you want one. I came to personally invite you to the next King of Fighters tournament. The mention of the tournament made Leona's heart skip a beat. Memories of their last experience resurfaced, a brutal and chaotic event that had left scars, both physical and emotional. A deep unease settled over her, though she masked it well. Something worse is coming. Clark's words were blunt and firm. We will be there, so you can leave now. His tone carried a sense of finality that left no room for argument. He knew Leona despised Mutiba, not just for his presence, but for what he represented. Mutiba was the epitome of unrestrained indulgence, a mercenary who saw women as mere conquests and respected only those who wielded strength. There was no honor in his line of work, only a practical adherence to whatever task paid the most. Had his current employer not kept him barely within the boundaries of legality, Clark was certain they would have been forced to eliminate him already. Mutiba chuckled, an unnervingly deep sound that carried a mix of amusement and menace. His scarred lips twisted into a grin as his whited-out eyes turned toward Leona. She's as fiery as ever, Mutiba thought, feeling the latent power within her. It wasn't just strength that drew his attention, it was the bloodlust buried deep in her soul, barely restrained. That dangerous energy was magnetic to someone like him, who lived on the edge of violence and chaos. Leona Hydern was no ordinary warrior. She was a monster in the guise of a disciplined soldier, a being of unimaginable potential destruction. And that potential excited Mutiba in ways he barely understood. He had seen her at her wildest before, when her blood had taken over and left him scarred. He wanted to claim her, but not like this. Not until she unleashed the beast he knew lay dormant within her. Not yet, he mused to himself as he turned to leave. Sadly, the dream will remain a dream for now. As Mutiba walked away, he absently touched his chest, feeling the ridges of scars left by their previous battle. That encounter had been unlike anything he'd ever faced, a stark reminder that even he, the feared genocider, was not invincible. Leona's unrelenting fury had not only marked his body but also shaken his confidence, opening his eyes to a world where strength alone was not enough. I'll be leaving now, so take care, he said aloud, his voice casual, though his thoughts were far from indifferent. He moved with his usual swagger, disappearing into the dense jungle that surrounded their temporary camp. Inwardly, he hoped for the completion of the Yin-Yang reactor, a mysterious project his employer had promised would grant him unimaginable power. With it, he could finally step onto a higher stage and perhaps face her again, not as a man outmatched, but as an equal, ready to claim what he desired. Leona watched Mutiba vanish into the trees, her sharp eyes narrowing as she suppressed the unease that had surfaced at the mention of the King of Fighters tournament. The last tournament had been a nightmare, and something in her blood, the cursed blood of the Orochi, whispered that worse was yet to come. Her fingers clenched at her sides, her jaw tightening. Why do I feel this way? Is it my blood warning me again? Leona, Clark's calm voice interrupted her thoughts. He didn't need to say more. His quiet presence was enough to anchor her. She exhaled slowly, pushing the feelings aside. Whatever was coming, she would face it head-on. She always had. But as the jungle grew quiet around them, the tension in the air lingered, heavy and foreboding. Naruto bolted upright, a cold sweat clinging to his skin as his breathing came fast and ragged. The words reverberated in his head like a haunting echo, "Almighty push." They weren't just words, they were a declaration of overwhelming destruction that had rattled him to his core. He scanned his surroundings, his pulse pounding in his ears. He was in the room King had provided for him, its modest furnishings illuminated by the faint glow of early morning light filtering through the curtains. Placing a trembling hand over his chest, he focused on the strong, steady rhythm of his heartbeat to ground himself. What was that? He thought, running his hand through his disheveled hair. What kind of attack was that? Why did it feel like everything was ending the moment those words were spoken? The sheer dread he had felt wasn't something he could easily shake off, and the sensation of helplessness gnawed at the edge of his mind. His musings were interrupted as he felt movement on either side of him. He froze momentarily before glancing down, realizing that Poison and Roxy were pressed against him, their bare bodies tangled with his. "Hey, boss," Roxy murmured groggily, her eyes barely open as she blinked at him in concern. "What happened?" Naruto's voice was flat, tinged with irritation. "What are you girls doing here?" "We couldn't sleep last night," Poison replied nonchalantly, stretching lazily as her hand slid across his chest with deliberate slowness. "Thought we'd snuggle with boss and see if it helped. Guess what? It worked like a charm. Best sleep I've had in ages." Naruto's eyes narrowed, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "Next time, don't do it without permission. You might not like the consequences." "But boss," Roxy chimed in, her tone soft and pleading, "she's not lying. You're really comfortable to snuggle against. We weren't trying to upset you." Naruto sighed, running a hand over his face. "Next time, try asking," he muttered, his voice quieter now, though the strange dream still weighed heavily on his mind. He shifted to get out of bed, only to realize with growing irritation that they had removed his underwear. He turned to the two women, his expression flat and unamused. "Really?" Poison smirked playfully, her head resting on the pillow as she gave a languid stretch. "You're welcome." Grumbling under his breath, Naruto grabbed his discarded underwear from the floor and made his way to the bathroom. His frustration deepened as he noticed the inevitable result of their shameless antics. His body had reacted, and he wasn't particularly thrilled about it. Closing the bathroom door behind him, he took a moment to collect himself, leaning on the sink as he splashed cold water on his face. He stared into the mirror, his reflection looking just as weary as he felt. What was that dream about? He thought, gripping the edges of the sink. It felt so real. Too real. The words lingered in his mind like a storm cloud. Almighty push. He didn't know what it was, but he had a feeling it wouldn't be the last time he heard it. King stepped into the room, her casual attire, fitted jeans and a purple t-shirt, adding to her commanding yet approachable presence. Her sharp gaze swept over the scene, quickly taking in Naruto's disheveled state and the two women lounging on the bed. "Naruto, are you okay?" she asked, her tone calm but laced with concern. Despite his shirtless and barely clothed appearance, King didn't so much as blink. She had seen far stranger things in her line of work. The two women, however, were another story. King's eyes narrowed as she addressed them directly, her voice taking on a colder edge. "Girls, if you try this nonsense again in my house, you'll be sleeping with the fishes." Roxy grinned mischievously, throwing her arms around Poison in an exaggerated display of mock fear. "Oh no, Poison, she's going to kill us." Poison smirked, but her tone shifted to something more conciliatory. "Don't worry, King, we'll behave." She glanced at Naruto, noting the tension in his expression, and decided it was time to stop pushing their luck. Naruto straightened, his voice even but subdued. "I'm fine. Just a nightmare. Sorry for the disturbance." His demeanor was calm, his mind already working to compartmentalize the unsettling emotions from the dream. He didn't seem the least bit self-conscious about his appearance, his past experiences leaving him unfazed by situations like this. King's perceptive gaze lingered on him for a moment longer. She recognized the subtle signs of someone shaken by something more than a simple bad dream. But she also knew when to step back. "If you say so," she said quietly, not wanting to press him further. "It's already afternoon," King continued, her tone more practical now. She gestured toward the clock on the wall. "Get ready and come eat lunch. I left some clothes for you." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked out, her stride purposeful. Naruto glanced at the bundle of clothes she had left, a simple shirt and a pair of comfortable pants. King's actions spoke volumes about her no-nonsense personality, and he appreciated that she wasn't making a fuss. "It's fine," Naruto told himself as he moved toward the bathroom. He turned on the shower, letting the cool water cascade over his body. The sensation helped steady his thoughts, grounding him in the present. The nightmare still lingered at the edges of his mind, but he forced himself to set it aside. "I don't have future sight. It's probably just stress," he reasoned. With the dream's unsettling weight pushed to the back of his mind, he resolved to focus on the day ahead. After freshening up, Naruto dressed quickly, ready to face whatever awaited him next. Roxy leaned her head against Poison's, her eyes sparkling with mischief but her thoughts running deeper than her playful exterior. "Sis, his body is really good. You'll have to help me control the itch, or I might attack him, she said mentally, her lips curling into a sly smile. Poison met her sister's gaze, a knowing look in her eyes as she replied through their shared mental link, we'll hold each other back. Without hesitation, she kissed Roxy on the lips, the gesture intimate and familiar. Their openness about sex was something they had shared for years, a bond that had grown as they explored the world together. Since the age of 16, the sisters had found comfort and satisfaction in each other and their teammates. Ordinary humans had never been able to keep up with their desires or their strength. But this time was different. If they wanted to attract Naruto, continuing their casual flings would be the wrong move entirely. No man, unless he was a cuckold, would accept his women sleeping around with others, and they instinctively knew Naruto wasn't the type to tolerate such behavior. While he hadn't spoken a single derogatory word about their past, his demeanor suggested he valued loyalty and sincerity in relationships. Roxy's playful grin softened as Poison's thoughts mirrored her own. Naruto seemed like the kind of man who saw love and intimacy as sacred, something shared only between true partners. His restraint so far had confirmed their suspicions. Any other man in his position might have taken advantage of their advances, but Naruto had held back. Poison's lips quirked into a small smile, her sharp mind analyzing the situation. At least he isn't Ryu, she thought with a quiet chuckle. Ryu, the man who lived solely for battle, devoid of any earthly desires, was the polar opposite of Naruto. Her thoughts lingered on Naruto's unwavering resolve, his sense of purpose, and his quiet strength. Unlike the fighters she had known, he was an enigma, a man whose passions ran deep but who held them tightly in check. Still, the sisters knew they had to tread carefully. Naruto was not a man who could be won over with mere seduction. For now, they would have to learn to control themselves, keeping their desires in check as they navigated this delicate new dynamic. In the towering Kengan Association headquarters, the atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable excitement surrounding the discussions held in the upper floors of the building. At the very top, the current boss of the Kengan Association, an old man with a frail frame but a sharp, calculating gaze, watched various fighters from across the world through the large, high-definition screens that displayed the latest matches. The Kengan Association, known for its influential members, business magnates who controlled vast networks of industries and properties, operated on a unique platform, high-stakes, underground fights where the outcome determined much more than just pride. The battles were used to secure business rights, properties, and other resources. The rush these men got from these intense contests was far more thrilling than any form of gambling, and it was a world where power and money intersected in brutal ways. However, all of this occurred under the watchful eye of the Muram Association, the governing body that regulated the actions of superhuman beings in this world. The Marine's power was immense, consisting of powerful clans that made sure fighters adhered to a strict set of rules. They prevented conflicts from spilling into civilian areas, ensuring that the fighters' aggression and abilities didn't cause unnecessary destruction outside the arena. They were the true enforcers, maintaining order in a chaotic world. The old man, whose eyes betrayed a sinister hunger for the fight, observed a recent match that had drawn his attention. It had been a battle involving Naruto, the young fighter who had single-handedly taken on Mad Gear and Eliza. The fight had already been recorded, and now, it was circulating across the internet, with people's interest in him growing by the minute. Initially, many had written off his victory over Zangief as a fluke, but after seeing him in action once more, it became clear that Naruto was much stronger than they had anticipated. Sir, should we invite him?" asked a large, imposing figure standing beside the old man. The man was built like a fortress, easily dwarfing most people around him, and wore a sleek black suit that contrasted sharply with his intimidating stature. The old man's gaze never wavered from the screen as he continued to watch the footage of Naruto's fight. His fingers tapped the edge of his desk rhythmically, his mind already at work. "Not yet," the old man replied coldly, his voice gravelly but filled with authority. "He doesn't have a team, and he doesn't yet qualify to go solo." His words were final, but there was a glint of interest in his eyes as he analyzed the young fighter's movements and strategy. They had eyes everywhere, and their network had been quick to pick up the footage of Naruto's impressive performance. The secretary standing nearby, a large-built individual with a commanding presence, stepped forward. "Should we offer him some guidance, or simply ignore him for now?" he inquired, clearly uncertain of the best approach. The old man's lips curled into a wicked smile as he considered his next move. Give him an invitation to the tournament in Bangkok. Let's see how he fares against the other participants. If he impresses us further, we might even consider him for solo status, like Akuma and Jin. The thought of the ensuing battles excited him. Naruto's raw power had piqued his interest, and he was eager to see how far the young fighter could go. A shadow of concern crossed the secretary's face as he glanced at his superior. Sir, are you sure about inviting those two demons? He asked, his tone heavy with apprehension and a trace of bloodlust. He had seen the carnage they could bring and knew the risk of unleashing such formidable fighters. The old man's eyes gleamed with a mad passion. Of course, he replied with an almost sadistic grin. They are the main course. I want them to fight and show me a true battle. The more chaos, the better. That's what I live for. His voice was almost a whisper, but it carried an unmistakable sense of authority and excitement that sent a chill down the secretary's spine. The secretary nodded, his own excitement barely contained beneath his stoic exterior. He had been chosen as the Fang of Metsuda, a position that required the highest level of skill, ruthlessness, and precision. He was the master's most trusted enforcer, a beast on the battlefield and a killer without equal. He had won the last 5 Kengan tournaments and was known for his brutal efficiency in eliminating targets. With a swift nod, the secretary left the room, his mind already focused on the task at hand. He would extend the invitation to Naruto and prepare for the chaos that was sure to follow. The old man would rest for now, but the wheels of the Kengan Association were always turning, and he knew that the best was yet to come. Naruto took a large bite of the food in front of him, savoring every piece. He hadn't realized how much he missed a proper meal. The warm, comforting sensation of a home-cooked breakfast, even a simple one, felt like a luxury he rarely got to experience. As he ate, he couldn't help but think of the many terrible meals he had endured in his past. Did you make this? He asked, his mouth full but his eyes bright with appreciation. Yes, I apologize if you expected something grand, King replied with a gentle smile. She had been watching him for a moment, noticing how quickly he dug in. Her eyes softened as she saw the joy on his face from such a basic meal. She had known hardship, and her experience in the rough parts of the city made her appreciate even the simplest comforts. Nah, it's one of the best I've seen. You have no idea what some of the stuff I had to endure tasted like, Naruto said with a grin, still excited as he continued eating. He wasn't exaggerating, some of the meals he had eaten in the past, especially during his training and after the war, had been far from enjoyable. He often had to make do with whatever he could get, no matter how bland or poorly prepared. King was a bit taken aback by his response. She had simply thought of this as a standard breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, some fruit, and a side of bacon. Nothing fancy, but enough to fill the stomach. Yet, from Naruto's reaction, she realized that he must have endured some terrible meals in his time. Her suspicion grew as she connected the dots, thinking about his upbringing. The thought of him coming from the mountains, where food would have been a rare luxury, made perfect sense. Harsh training conditions, a solitary existence, no wonder something as simple as breakfast would be such a treat for him. Naruto didn't mind the discomfort of eating at random stores in the city. It was more about the stares, the judgments from the people in the shops, that bothered him. The lingering glares, the way they acted like he was less than human, made him avoid public shopping whenever possible. It wasn't something he often voiced, but it was part of his reality. Even now, as he ate this meal, the memories of those harsh experiences lingered at the edges of his mind. King noticed his shift in demeanor as he ate, as if he had momentarily left the room with his thoughts. She didn't push him to explain, though. She understood what it felt like to have the weight of the world on your shoulders, and the little comforts that made life a little more bearable. She could see it in Naruto's eyes, the exhaustion. The battles fought not just with enemies, but with life itself. Enjoy it then, because we've got other things to discuss before you go off and do your thing, King said with a smile, her tone light and teasing, but there was a warmth in her voice that conveyed care. Naruto looked up at her, meeting her gaze as he chewed, his face softening. There was a moment of mutual understanding between them. He wasn't the only one who had lived through tough times. King's smile reached her eyes as she continued, "You remind me of where I come from, back in the hood. Life was tough, even the small things felt out of reach. But those small things, those little comforts, were what kept us going. Naruto felt a strange sense of kinship with King in that moment. Despite their vastly different worlds, they shared a common experience, struggling through tough circumstances and finding strength in the most unlikely places. He nodded, finishing his bite before speaking again, his voice quiet but sincere. "Thanks," he said. "This really means a lot to me." King didn't respond right away, letting the silence linger as she continued to watch him. She knew that Naruto's journey wasn't an easy one. It was clear from the way he carried himself, the weight of his experiences that he tried to hide. But in moments like this, when they shared simple things like breakfast or quiet conversation, she could see a bit of peace in him, even if it was just for a moment. They both knew there were bigger things at play, and the world outside these walls was full of battles they would face together. But for now, they allowed themselves this brief respite, no fighting, no stress, just a small break from the chaos. And it was enough. As Naruto finished the meal, the silence in the room was comfortable, with only the quiet sounds of the aftermath of the shared breakfast. King went about her task of kicking out the freeloaders, sending them on their way with a casual authority. The apartment, now empty of distractions, felt peaceful, almost serene. Naruto leaned back in his chair, feeling the full warmth of the meal settle in his stomach. It reminded him of simpler times, memories of Shion and Hinata, his two close companions back in his home world. Though they were his girlfriends in a platonic sense, their relationships had never been conventional by the standards of most. In the ninja world, the concept of monogamy was a fluid one. People loved who they loved, married who they wanted, and there were no strict laws binding them. Naruto's sense of relationships had been molded by this philosophy. If you liked someone, you were together, and that was that. There were no labels to complicate things, no societal pressures. But despite this openness, Naruto had never truly experienced what most would consider love. He had often claimed to love Sakura, especially in his youth, but it was a misguided and naive form of affection, something he would later understand better under the tutelage of his master, Jiraiya. Jiraiya had been much more than a teacher to him. He had been a father figure, someone who shaped Naruto's understanding of the world. The 2.5 years spent training under Jiraiya had been the most formative of his life. Jiraiya had not just taught him combat skills, techniques, or strategy, but had instilled in him a deeper understanding of love, loyalty, and what it meant to be a good person. Naruto had always been talented, but his progress was slow, particularly due to the presence of Kurama, the Nine Tails. Kurama's strength limited him, and despite Naruto's vast potential, the demon fox's resistance prevented him from fully tapping into that power. So, the training had to be painstaking, slow, and deliberate. Jiraiya, who knew his pupil wasn't a genius like some of the other shinobi, had taken extra care in his teachings. In time, Naruto realized the full weight of the test Jiraiya had set for him. It was no longer just about becoming stronger or fighting to protect the village. His test was tied to his relationship with Kurama. Jinchuriki could bond with their tailed beasts either through mutual understanding or by defeating them in combat. But Kurama was stubborn, prideful, and refused to cooperate. There would be no easy path to victory. Naruto had to fight, to face the beast head-on, and prove himself worthy of the power. That fight with Kurama, the ultimate test set by his father, would be the moment Naruto surpassed the limits of humanity. And it was a test he had to face alone. It was this realization that changed everything for him. Jiraiya had opened his eyes to the complexities of the world, teaching him that not all people were inherently good. There were a few, but they were rare. Most were just normal people, going about their lives, indifferent to the struggles of others. In his own experience, Naruto had come to understand that being good was difficult. It was easy to say the right things, to be a friend in words, but it was far harder to act on those words. He had always felt isolated, but it wasn't something he blamed his friends for. It was simply the way the world worked. They would lay down their lives for him, sure, but the empathy and concern they showed was limited. They cared when it affected them, but not necessarily when it didn't. And this, in Naruto's mind, wasn't an evil trait, it was just normal. It wasn't a betrayal of friendship, it was simply human nature. People, even those closest to him, often turned a blind eye to things that didn't concern them directly. This didn't make them bad people, but it did make them flawed, just like everyone else. It was an uncomfortable realization for Naruto, but it was one he had to accept. He couldn't force others to care more than they were capable of, nor could he allow his own sense of justice to blind him to the limitations of the human heart. As King returned to the table, her casual demeanor a sharp contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling in Naruto's mind, he couldn't help but reflect on everything Jiraiya had taught him. It was clear now more than ever that the path he had chosen was his own to walk, and he had to be ready to face the darker realities of the world, whether it was his fight with Kurama, the complexities of human relationships, or the weight of responsibility he carried. After the long, grueling journey of training and self-discovery, Naruto had come to terms with many of the internal battles he had faced. One of the more significant changes in his life was the blossoming of a relationship with Hinata, the quiet, strong girl who had always supported him in subtle ways. It had been a quiet confession, something tentative, yet full of sincerity. He had seen through her feelings long before she ever spoke them out loud, and to his own surprise, he had accepted her heart. It wasn't that he hadn't been aware of her feelings, but the realization had come after a period of deep reflection and growth. He knew that this would be a trial, a chance to see if they could build something together, but that wasn't a thought that filled him with hesitation. Instead, he felt a warmth inside him, a sense of joy, knowing that someone as beautiful and strong as Hinata saw him in a way that no one else had. For someone who had always felt like an outsider, someone who had longed for acceptance, it felt like a gift, a chance to finally experience love. Hinata had always been the quiet one in the class, a girl who kept to herself and had never really made her presence known. But beneath that quiet exterior was a strength that not many knew about. Hinata was a woman of substance, someone whose actions spoke louder than words. She had been the first to ever truly call out to him, not out of pity, but out of a desire to connect, to reach out to someone who had been ignored by everyone else. It was during the Chunin exams, after Naruto had suffered a painful injury, that Hinata's care had meant something more than just a simple act of kindness. Her healing balm wasn't just a remedy for his wounds, it was a symbol of her quiet admiration and concern for him, something Naruto had never forgotten. While his teammates, whom he considered his closest allies, had been more focused on their own concerns during that time, Hinata had been the one to cheer for him. She had believed in him when no one else had. Her feelings for him had been a slow burn, a deep and steady respect that had grown over the years. Her love for him was not one born of admiration from afar, but one formed through shared struggles, mutual understanding, and the knowledge that they both carried heavy burdens. But Hinata's life had never been easy. Her father's weakness, her family's expectations, and the constant pressure of living up to the Hyuga name had left her feeling burdened and torn. Naruto, too, had his own weight to carry, the burden of being the Kyuubi's vessel and the village pariah. But Hinata's struggles had always been so much more personal. Her loyalty to her family, particularly her younger sister Hanabi, had shaped her into someone who had to constantly suppress her own desires to keep peace within the clan. She had been forced to hide her true self, to lower her head and act weak to protect her family, and in doing so, she had distanced herself from the world around her. Naruto could only sympathize with her. He had always felt like an outsider, but Hinata's isolation was different. Her love for her sister was something pure and unselfish, and she had been willing to sacrifice her own happiness to ensure Hanabi's safety. It was a tragic and beautiful thing. But in Naruto, she had found someone who didn't judge her, someone who saw her for who she truly was. He didn't want her to hide anymore. Together, they had begun to slowly piece together a relationship, one where they could support each other in ways they never had before. As Naruto continued to grow emotionally, it became clear that their connection was more than just a simple bond. He didn't want to rush into love, but he knew that this could be the start of something lasting. He didn't want to push her, but with time, he was sure that they would find their way to something deeper. Hinata had never asked for much, but she had always given so much of herself to him, and that was something Naruto would never take for granted. Not long after, a mission had led him to meet Shien, the beautiful and enigmatic priestess who would become the second important woman in his life. Unlike Hinata, Shien was direct, bold, and unafraid to voice her desires. She had fallen for Naruto during their time together, not through some grand display of affection, but through his persistence and determination to protect her, no matter what. Whereas Hinata had always been shy, reserved, and hesitant to express her feelings, Shion was confident and upfront. She had been more than willing to ask him directly to bear her child, a proposal that Naruto hadn't expected but was open to, should he fall in love with her. In the end, Shion became his second girlfriend, and while it had all been quite sudden, Naruto couldn't help but feel grateful for the experiences they shared together. But as fate would have it, a mission to hunt down a forbidden puppet user had pulled Naruto away from the warmth of his new relationships and led him to the world he now found himself in. This new world, with its own challenges and struggles, was something he had yet to fully understand. His past relationships, his bond with Hinata and Shion, would continue to shape him as he faced new trials and enemies, and in this strange new world, Naruto was determined to find his place once more. The past had shaped him into the person he was today, and now, as he prepared to face the unknown, he couldn't help but wonder if love would find him again, whether it was through the women he had already met or someone new entirely. One thing was certain, Naruto had never been one to run away from his feelings, and no matter where life took him, he would face it with the same determination and resolve that had always defined him. Naruto sat across from King, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed her words. His hand rested casually on the table, his usual carefree demeanor giving way to a more serious expression. As King sipped her coffee, her eyes never left him, watching his reactions closely. "Naruto, how much do you know about the world?" King asked, her voice calm, yet laced with concern. Naruto leaned back slightly, his usual confident grin replaced by a more neutral expression. "Not much," he admitted honestly, his voice steady. "I lived in a village hidden from the world." King had suspected as much, though she was a bit surprised by his straightforward answer. She had seen glimpses of his power during their earlier encounters, but she hadn't known the full extent of his background. A village hidden from the world. That only deepened her curiosity. She set her coffee mug down carefully, her expression turning more serious as she looked at Naruto. "I guessed as much," she began, her tone now more measured. "So, you don't know about the Muram Association?" Naruto blinked at her, his curiosity piqued. "What is that?" King leaned forward slightly, her hands now folded on the table as she began to explain. Muram Association is an organization that oversees the use of ki. It's made up of various clans and martial artists, and they operate all over the world. They're not directly involved in every fight, but if a ki user causes too much damage, they step in. They ensure that things don't spiral out of control. If you had let that battle drag on and caused a disturbance in the city, they would have taken notice. Naruto's brows furrowed, clearly intrigued but cautious. "So they're like enforcers." "Exactly," King nodded, her eyes focused on him. "And right now, they're in a very bad mood. You see, some of their top members were killed by a man named Jin Kazama. That means they'll be on high alert, and you'll want to stay off their radar for now. The Muram Association has a network, and they know about most of the powerful fighters out there. You might be on that list now, whether you realize it or not." Naruto's face remained neutral, though his mind raced as he processed this new information. He hadn't even thought about the consequences of his actions on a global scale. Fighting a few strong opponents had seemed simple enough, but this was something far larger than he had anticipated. King's voice grew quieter as she continued. "Muram isn't the only force you should worry about, though. There are two organizations that operate in the shadows, Shadaloo and Nest. Both of them are dangerous, unethical, and are known for their involvement in dark and illegal practices. Shadaloo, especially, has a reputation for kidnapping powerful fighters and using them for their own ends." Naruto's jaw clenched slightly. He'd heard of such organizations before, in passing, but hearing the details gave him a sense of urgency. The last thing he needed was to be caught up in something like this, especially if they were targeting fighters like him. "For now," King continued, "Nest seems more interested in someone named Kyo Kusanagi, but that doesn't mean they won't turn their attention toward you. I just want you to be careful, Naruto. You're strong, but even the strongest can be taken down when they let their guard down. The last fight you were in, you were reckless. That move that damaged your hand. Careless, even if you have a powerful healing factor. Don't underestimate your enemies. There's always someone stronger lurking in the shadows." Naruto absorbed her words quietly, his fingers tapping lightly on the table as he thought. It was a sobering reality that hit him, but it was something he knew all too well from his previous experiences. People were always lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. Is nobody going to take care of them? He asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Where did they operate mostly? King's gaze shifted upward, thoughtful. Muram is actively hunting them down, and some countries are working to destroy them, but these organizations are elusive. They're based in many countries, operating from the shadows, so it's not as simple as just tracking them down. They could be hiding anywhere, from the middle of nowhere to major cities. Her tone became more measured as she continued. They operate mostly in places like China, Japan, Thailand, India, the USA, Russia, and Australia. They're all over the globe. Naruto nodded slowly, his mind turning over the possibilities. He had never expected to be drawn into something like this, an international network of martial artists and shadowy organizations. The stakes were higher now, far beyond anything he had experienced before. King observed his expression carefully. She could see the determination in his eyes, the same look she had seen in fighters who were itching for a fight, no matter the consequences. Don't tell me you want to fight them? King asked, raising an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips as she noticed the shift in Naruto's demeanor. Naruto didn't answer right away. His gaze was intense, his thoughts clearly racing. He didn't have all the facts yet, but one thing was certain. If these organizations posed a threat to his newfound relationships and the people he cared about, he wouldn't hesitate to face them head-on. Whether it was Muram, Shadaloo, or Nest, they were now on his radar. And he wasn't about to let anyone stand in his way. Naruto's eyes sparkled with determination as he spoke. From what I heard, they don't sound good, so if I come across them, I'll handle them. And if they have databases of fighters, they must have databases on all kinds of abilities. I want to break into their base if possible. His voice carried a curious excitement, the same adventurous spirit that had driven him to explore unknown worlds back in his ninja days. King studied him carefully, her expression softening. She understood that feeling, the thrill of uncovering hidden knowledge. The idea of breaking into an enemy base, not just for the thrill of it but to find powerful secrets, resonated with him deeply. He was no stranger to such pursuits. In his past, with Jiraiya, Naruto had raided several organizations in the ninja world, uncovering powerful jutsus and forbidden techniques. Some of those discoveries had been invaluable, though not without their risks. King leaned back slightly, considering his words. I know it seems useful, but the risk is too great. They have very strong fighters who could even take down demons, if they were willing to sacrifice their main fighters. Do you understand how dangerous it could get if you pushed them too much? They were fighting against countries and whole organizations. Naruto's grin didn't waver. Relax, King. I know my limits and would never act without thinking. I'll attack when an opportunity presents itself. I'm not going to go hunt them down or anything. His voice carried a casual confidence, but there was an underlying seriousness to it as well. He understood the risks, but he also understood that the greatest risks often yielded the greatest rewards. King's gaze softened slightly, but her concern didn't wane. Even then, you'll be on their wanted list. Ryu and Kyo face attacks every week. Are you okay with living a life where danger can strike at any moment? Naruto's expression didn't change, his resolve still unwavering. I'm used to that kind of life. It won't matter much. Besides, now I have subordinates to help me out. He said this matter-of-factly, as if the presence of allies was just another facet of his growing journey. King sighed inwardly, recognizing the determination in his words. It was the same kind of unwavering resolve that she had seen in fighters like Terry and Ryu, individuals who refused to back down, no matter the danger. She had long been accustomed to such attitudes, but she also knew the toll it could take. Even she, with all her years of experience, had moments where peace seemed more appealing than the constant fight. I understand, King said softly, but what do you intend to do with them? These organizations can't be trusted, you know. Naruto's eyes lit up with excitement as he replied. I intend to use them for practice. You see, I'm going to be the leader of my village someday. This experience will help me out. I want to earn my keep, manage forces and properties. With them as the starting point, I can gather more fighters, build up my strength, and evolve my fighting style. I'm just starting to grow now, so this is the perfect time. His words carried a raw energy, the kind that came with a person ready to step into a new phase of their life. King listened intently, watching as his excitement grew. He was already strong, perhaps stronger than most fighters she knew, but his ambition was something else. If he was just beginning to grow, the peak of martial arts was within his reach. She couldn't help but be impressed, even if a part of her wondered if he was simply boasting. But there was something in the way he spoke, a conviction that made it hard to doubt him. "Well, if you want to train," King said, her voice taking on a more practical tone, "you can go to the mountains and nature for bigger purposes. But if you're looking to polish your fighting style without causing massive damage, there are many gyms for people like us." Naruto pondered for a moment before responding. I'll need both, but first, I'll go with the nature one." King nodded. "Your choice, but remember to be careful. You won't be the only one out there." "I will keep that in mind," Naruto replied, his grin widening. "And thank you, King. You really are the best. From this day on, you're my friend. If you ever need help, just call me, and I'll come running without hesitation." Before King could react, Naruto stood up, wrapped her in a tight hug, and spun her around in the chair, causing her to laugh in surprise. He set her down gently, his grin infectious. "No problem," King smiled, still chuckling at his energetic display. "It's nothing, really. So don't go overboard on me. But yes, we're friends." Naruto's face softened as he gave her a final nod. "Well, I'll see you later. Take care," King called as he turned to leave. As Naruto walked out of her apartment, King couldn't help but smile. He was an unpredictable whirlwind, a force of nature. Whatever he set his sights on, it was clear he wasn't going to back down. She had no doubt that his journey would be one to watch. The world had just gained another person who wouldn't be content until they had reached the peak of their potential. Naruto walked the bustling streets of Tokyo, his mind a swirling mix of thoughts and emotions. The world around him seemed so familiar, yet so foreign. He didn't belong here, but somehow, here he was. As he passed by neon signs, street vendors, and busy commuters, his thoughts drifted back to the chaos of his arrival. He'd appeared in this world without any clue of how or why, after chasing someone through a portal. That portal had been his only link to his old world, his village, his people. But now, everything felt different. Kyuubi was missing, and he could feel the absence of the nine tails in a way that was both physical and emotional. His body felt stronger, faster even, yet restrained. His power had been altered somehow, a feeling of being incomplete gnawing at him. He had lost something important. A dream from the night before crept into his mind, a vision of a man from Akatsuki, a powerful figure who seemed to wield shockwaves that covered vast ranges. The memory was too vivid to be just a normal dream. In his past, Naruto had never experienced dreams like that. His dreams were usually filled with darkness, with thoughts of Kyuubi, ramen, or becoming Hokage. Dreams about his own ambitions and fears. But this was different. This dream felt real, as if it were a memory, a moment from his past. But whose memory was it? Naruto paused at a street corner, his brow furrowing as the thought took root. On a scale of 1 to 100, that seemed pretty messed up, he thought to himself, shaking his head slightly. He had always been someone who could laugh through pain, but this felt like something deeper, something more unsettling. Okay, think, Naruto muttered to himself, trying to piece things together. The man in his dream wasn't someone he knew. It was a memory, but it didn't fit with his usual recollections. Could someone have placed false memories inside of him? Or had he forgotten them due to some kind of trauma? His mind raced, trying to fit the pieces into a coherent picture. Where were they fighting? He wondered. Most likely inside a city, and not just any city, Konoha. I'm pretty sure it was Konoha. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. If the man in his dream was connected to the destruction of Konoha, then Naruto's memories were more fragmented than he thought. He had jumped through that portal, but now he was left with nothing but gaps. Someone must have messed with my memories, Naruto muttered, his eyes narrowing as the pieces began to form. But it wouldn't make sense for it to be false. The last thing I remember is jumping through the portal, right before everything went to hell. So, if I take the most likely outcome, I probably forgot because of the trauma. My mind is trying to protect me from it. The more Naruto thought about it, the more his stomach twisted with anxiety. If Konoha was destroyed by this man, Then what had happened to the people he loved? Kakashi, Sakura, Hinata, everyone, had they survived? Did anyone make it out? They must have survived, he whispered to himself, trying to hold on to hope. If I'm here, then they must have made it. Maybe it's because of Kakashi's space-time jutsu. If something went wrong with it, this could be the result. The thought was comforting, but not entirely reassuring. But I can't think too much about it. I need to stay focused. He breathed deeply, forcing his mind to calm. Okay, let's stay positive. No need to let bad thoughts take over. He had faced darkness before, accepted it, and used it as fuel to move forward. But this was different. This was his home, his village. And he had no idea if it was still standing, if his friends were safe. Jiraiya would want me to stay strong, Naruto thought, recalling his old sensei's words. Don't turn away from your pain. Face it, accept it, and keep moving forward. That's the only way. He exhaled slowly, finding some measure of peace in the decision. His friends were strong. They could survive. But he couldn't afford to waste time. He had 2 years to figure this out and return to them before it was too late. They'll be okay, I just need to make sure I get back before things get worse. Naruto stopped in front of an electronics store, his attention momentarily caught by a display showing the Spider-Man movie. His lips twitched into a smile as he looked at the screen. I went to the movies just last week in my memories. I wonder how good the movies are in this world. A sense of nostalgia washed over him. In his past life, he had always enjoyed action-packed movies with some romance or comedy thrown in. It was a simple pleasure, one that reminded him of the life he had before everything turned upside down. It was moments like this, small and quiet, that helped him find balance amid the chaos. Naruto wasn't particularly fond of the horror genre. The scares never seemed to hit the mark for him. After all, in the ninja world, real threats were far more terrifying than any movie could conjure up. The terrifying, life-or-death stakes of a mission or an unexpected attack always kept his senses sharp. Horror films felt like child's play in comparison, and honestly, only normal civilians seemed to enjoy them. In his experience, ninjas didn't get scared easily, they'd trained their minds and bodies to handle far worse things. Still, there was something curious about the film world in this new world. The people here were from all kinds of backgrounds, and the action scenes, while sometimes exaggerated, were real in a sense. The special effects and technology behind them were fascinating. In his world, technology was still behind in many areas, even though they had electricity, radios, computers, and guns. Cameras and game consoles existed, but vehicles like automobiles weren't common in the ninja world. Ninja could move faster than the machines, and those machines weren't practical in a world of constant conflict. The lack of cars was one of the reasons why tech had remained underdeveloped. Most of the focus was on magical powers, combat techniques, and other arcane practices. The ninja world had its share of advanced biological science, though, particularly in medical research, as many powerful families sought ways to enhance their bloodlines and perfect their warriors through biology rather than technology. Naruto paused, feeling his thoughts start to spiral again. He needed to calm his mind before he drove himself to exhaustion. Right, I shouldn't forget to relax or I'll end up doing more harm to my body than good. He couldn't afford to lose balance, not when his body and mind were in such unfamiliar territory. Jiraiya's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him about the importance of moderation. Balance in life, Naruto muttered to himself. That had been one of his sensei's key teachings. It was easy to get lost in the intensity of training or the rush of battle, but in the long run, pushing too hard could lead to burnout. His original plan had been to train steadily and enjoy the world he found himself in at a moderate pace, learning new things and growing into the leader he aspired to be. There was plenty of time ahead of him to become stronger, and he had to pace himself, especially if he intended to travel the world, gaining experience and wisdom from different cultures. He smiled to himself as he thought about Eliza. She had the knowledge he needed about the enemies he might face, and with her help, he could form strategies that would give him the upper hand. As much as Naruto enjoyed fighting, he knew that strategy and preparation were just as important. I'll talk to her soon. We can start planning. Then I can focus on my jutsu. It's only a matter of time before I master them all. Naruto had confidence in his abilities. He'd trained in the most difficult conditions, and his control over chakra had become top-notch. With his newfound control, he knew he'd master his jutsu in no time. The hand seals would come naturally to him, and his training would be all the more efficient without the limitations he used to face. Taking a deep breath and stretching his arms above his head, Naruto steeled himself for the next step in his journey. He had a lot to do, but it was all part of his growth. With his resolve firm, he turned and headed back to meet up with Mad Gear. There were new challenges ahead, but he was ready. There was no time to waste. Time to get to work, Naruto thought as he moved toward his next destination. On the rooftop of King's Bar, the gang had gathered, their usual casual demeanor on display. It wasn't the first time they'd been forced to accept a new leader, so they had grown accustomed to the constant shifting of power. But even for a seasoned crew like theirs, the unknown of their new boss still loomed, and they waited with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Relento, ever the tactician, leaned back against the railing, his eyes scanning the city below. His sharp mind rarely missed a detail, and he was always calculating, always thinking several steps ahead. Unlike the others, he wasn't blinded by the thrill of combat or the rush of violence. To him, power wasn't just about brute force, it was about control, influence, and understanding how to manipulate the situation to his advantage. Poison, do you really think it will work? You spent the night with him, so what's the verdict? Relento asked, his tone calm yet filled with underlying curiosity. It wasn't just about trust anymore, he wanted to know exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. Knowing Naruto's weaknesses, quirks, and mindset would be invaluable as they moved forward. If anything, Relento understood the value of information. Knowledge was a weapon just as sharp as any blade. Poison, still sitting on the edge of the rooftop, took a long drag from her cigarette before slowly exhaling, her gaze distant as she stared out at the sprawling city. He's a virgin, cares a lot about feelings and chastity, she began, her voice low and steady, so you guys better avoid talking about those topics if you don't want to get thrown aside. She paused for a moment, remembering the brief but intense interaction. He's very perceptive. Even when he sleeps, his danger level doesn't go down. I thought of trying to kill him in his sleep, and the moment I even considered it, the danger radiating off him spiked so much that my legs gave out. She paused again, a small smirk forming as she threw her cigarette down to the ground, crushing it under her heel. Just remember, he might look careless, but he's a monster in human flesh. We haven't seen him fight yet, but I've never felt a threat like that before. We might think we're tough, but he's on a different level. The gang listened attentively. They weren't surprised by her assessment. Poison had almost certainly tested Naruto's limits in their previous encounters, and the fact that she had survived, let alone spoken so candidly about him, spoke volumes. Naruto's reputation as a survivor of countless brutal fights and his intense training under Jiraiya had molded him into someone capable of defending himself even when unconscious, a skill that made him far more dangerous than most could ever anticipate. Relento, ever practical, nodded thoughtfully, taking in the information with the seriousness it warranted. Understood, he said, his voice steady. We'll focus on legal operations for now. His tone was one of quiet resolve. Though the temptation to indulge in the more chaotic and fun aspects of their lifestyle was strong, the reality of their new leader's potential power was enough to make him cautious. It was clear that this was a man they could not afford to underestimate. The others began to murmur in agreement, some more enthusiastic than others. Most likely, Poison continued, but we can slip in some underhanded things here and there. He doesn't seem to care much about stealing, as long as it doesn't harm people. Her eyes twinkled mischievously, already formulating plans in her mind. Despite the tense atmosphere, the idea of running a business, albeit a shady one, seemed to spark something in her. She chuckled, turning to face the others. I was thinking we could slip in some machines, start a legal business, you know. It's slower than just stealing it outright, but maybe it could be fun. Mad Gear and Co. Ha ha ha. However, the laughter she expected didn't come. Instead, the silence stretched on a moment too long, and Poison's sharp instincts told her something was off. She glanced around, only to realize that someone had silently approached her, standing right behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she turned slowly to face the figure. There, standing with a calm yet dangerous presence, was Naruto. The gang froze. The tension in the air thickened, as they realized that Naruto had overheard the conversation. How long had he been standing there? Had he heard everything? Poison, with a mix of surprise and curiosity, met Naruto's gaze. His expression was unreadable, his usual carefree attitude replaced by an intensity that matched the weight of the situation. "So," Naruto said, his voice casual yet tinged with a hint of amusement, "what were you all talking about?" "Mad gear. Starting a legal business." For a moment, the group was silent, unsure of how to react. Then Relento, with his usual calm demeanor, was the first to speak. "Just discussing plans," he said smoothly, his eyes locked on Naruto's, calculating. "Nothing more." Naruto's lips curled into a smirk. "Good," he said, his voice light, though his eyes showed that he wasn't entirely fooled. "I'm all for making money, as long as no one gets hurt." He turned and leaned against the edge of the roof, his back to the group, as if to give them a moment to adjust. "But don't think I won't be watching. I'm not like your previous bosses." The silence that followed was thick with the weight of his words. The gang knew that this new leader would be different, dangerous, but perhaps the one they needed if they wanted to succeed in this chaotic world. Naruto's words hung in the air as he spoke passionately about his goals. His eyes gleamed with determination as he landed on the rooftop, his jump from the telephone pole effortless, like he had done it 1,000 times before. His smile was wide and full of energy, a stark contrast to the gravity of what he had just shared. "I think that's a good idea," he continued, his voice light yet firm, "but let's earn the money through a tournament or battle instead. We are all fighters, so let's use our birthright to earn our stay." His words were a challenge to the gang, inviting them to test their skills and prove themselves. It wasn't just about power, it was about earning respect through battle. Roxy, standing close by, couldn't help but smile back. She had changed her outfit since their last meeting. Gone were the short denim pants, replaced with orange shorts that came down to her knees. Her black top, leaving her belly button exposed, showed off the rose tattoo she had on her stomach, its thorns curling around the edge. She was confident, her gaze never wavering as she looked at Naruto with curiosity. "Boss," she asked with a playful tone, "what is your goal? If we know it, we can do better than just sitting around waiting for your commands." She genuinely wanted to understand him, not just as their boss, but as someone who could lead them to something greater. She had always been a fighter, but now she was beginning to see a bigger picture, one that could involve wealth, power, and influence. If they could follow him and align with his ambitions, there was a chance to be part of something much larger than their own lives. Naruto's smile widened even more as he answered. "My goal is to become the strongest and learn dimensional travel. I intend to take down people like Akuma and force them to give me the answers. That is my top goal," he said, his voice filled with excitement. The ambition in his tone was clear, the desire to transcend boundaries, to fight the greatest threats, and to unlock the mysteries that lay beyond this world. "But on the other hand," he continued, "I also want to learn leadership skills and lead our group to become successful in this world, since my future is to be the leader of my people." He took a breath, and his expression became even more resolute. "I am the son of the Uzumaki clan, the son of the 4th Lord of Konoha, and the future 6th Lord of Konoha." The weight of his words settled into the air. Konoha. The name meant so much to him. The village that had shaped his identity, the place where he had once been a mere orphan, and now, it was a symbol of his future. Naruto wasn't just a boy dreaming of being Hokage anymore, he had a vision, a strategy. He had the strength and the will to see it through. He looked at them, his gaze unwavering, his words sharp and full of purpose. "As for what Konoha is, it's a ninja village," he explained. "What do you guys think? This path is going to be fun and difficult, filled with danger and opportunities." There was a pause as his words sunk in. The gang, who had been used to chaotic lives and constant struggle, could sense the weight of Naruto's vision. They weren't just following a boss, they were being led by someone with a mission, someone who understood that power was more than just strength. It was about vision, about leadership, and about making decisions that would change the world. Roxy looked at him, her playful demeanor now shifted to one of admiration. She had always followed strong leaders, but Naruto was different. There was something about him, something raw and untapped, that made her believe in his dream. Maybe it was the fire in his eyes or the way he carried himself, but she felt like this path could lead to something extraordinary. Meanwhile, Poison, who had been observing from the shadows, noticed the change in the air. There was no denying it, Naruto wasn't just a fighter, he was a force. The kind of person who could lead them to heights they had never even considered. She had started out with her usual approach, seeing him as another mark to manipulate. But now, she wasn't so sure. She was intrigued. Naruto continued, his tone turning more reflective as he spoke about the history of Konoha. Peace and order couldn't be attained by a single man, he said, his voice low but steady. The path Jiraiya walked was limited. I see that now. A single man, no matter how strong, cannot bring true peace. It takes something more, something bigger. He paused, as if reflecting on the weight of history itself. Hashirama and Madara had the chance to bring peace to the world, but they chose selfishness and narrow-mindedness. Madara gave in to hate once Hashirama sided with the people, and Hashirama, he gave up a once-in-a-lifetime chance for peace because he didn't want to cause death. He chose the path of non-violence, and in the end, it led to his death. Naruto's eyes grew more intense as he spoke about the two men who had shaped the history of Konoha. Hashirama could have controlled the power to create a utopia, but he didn't. Madara, on the other hand, would have caused unnecessary destruction just to prove his dominance. That's the difference. Together, they could have changed the world. But now, it's up to me. The gang could sense that Naruto wasn't just speaking about the past, he was laying the groundwork for his future. This wasn't just about becoming the strongest. It was about building something that would last, something that would transcend the mistakes of the past. Naruto's ambition was no longer just to be Hokage for the sake of recognition. Now, it was about using that power to reshape the world in his own image. They all stood in silence for a moment, each one reflecting on what Naruto had just shared. The world he was describing wasn't one they had ever thought about, at least not in such grand terms. But now, with Naruto at the helm, they could see that the road ahead would be full of challenges, yes, but also limitless possibilities. This was no longer just about survival. It was about conquering everything in their path and reshaping the world as they saw fit. And for the first time, they were excited to follow someone with such a bold vision. Naruto's thoughts were heavy with the weight of the lessons he had learned. He had studied the histories of the Sage of Six Paths and his sons, understanding how peace, even when achieved, could unravel when not accompanied by the strength to preserve it. The sage's world had faltered because he had failed to create a lasting force. His sons, like Hashirama and Madara, were ultimately torn by opposing ideologies, both with the potential to maintain peace but unable to do so because of their deeply rooted differences. The older brother had been defeated, and the younger brother, unable to kill him, had allowed a war to ignite. The conflict that followed was an unavoidable result of their inability to resolve their struggles through stronger leadership. This lesson stung particularly because it mirrored the very problems that Naruto was determined to avoid in his own life. The paths of destruction that had come from this failed peace were something he would not allow for the world he sought to build. His reflection on the history of the sage and his sons felt all too relevant, especially in the light of his ongoing concerns with Sasuke. Jiraiya had warned him about these patterns, making him understand that Sasuke, like the sons of the sage, was on a potentially destructive path. The same could be said for Naruto's own past, where he had grown up shunned by his village and almost slipped into the shadows of darkness. Jiraiya had taught him that kindness was essential, but that there was a limit. You could not afford to be too soft in the face of betrayal and evil. Sometimes, you had to show a strength that would maintain the confidence of your people. It was this very philosophy that Naruto would carry into his leadership, strength that ensured peace could endure. Will you kill Sasuke if there is no choice left? Jiraiya's words echoed in Naruto's mind as he continued to reflect. It was the final lesson, one that Jiraiya had imparted on him with the weight of his own painful regrets. The man had lived with the regret of not killing Orochimaru when he had the chance, and now, he bore the burden of the snake's destruction on his conscience. Naruto's conclusion, after hours of meditation, was clear. If Sasuke fell too far into darkness and there was no other choice, he would do what was necessary. He would kill him. The words hurt as they formed in his mind, but he understood their necessity. Jiraiya's pain had become his own. He would not allow himself to be trapped in that same cycle of regret. He had to be strong, even if it meant making the hardest decisions. His thoughts turned to the people he cared for, the bonds that kept him tethered to the world. His life was no longer just his own. He had friends, family, and people who relied on him. It was a responsibility that he could not take lightly. His empathic ability, which had been amplified by Kurama, allowed him to connect with others on a level he had never imagined. He felt their pain, their joy, their sorrow, and it made him more resolute in his goal. This was the power of understanding, and it was what kept him grounded in his mission. Naruto thought back to his experiences with Gaara and Sasuke. He had connected with them, felt their darkness, their despair. He had shared his pain with them, and in doing so, helped them find their way. But not everyone could be saved. Some were too far gone, and it was a hard truth that Naruto had come to accept. He would not allow the darkness of others to overshadow the light that he sought to bring into the world. I will walk the path that my father figure, and the others before me walked, Naruto said to himself, his voice quiet but firm. The journey would be difficult, but it was his responsibility to complete it. Peace could only be achieved by understanding the dangers of complacency. By embracing the truth of the past and the lessons it held, Naruto would forge a future where those he loved and the world he envisioned could thrive. His steps were now sure and unwavering, filled with a confidence that had not been there before. He had accepted the weight of his mission, knowing full well the sacrifices it would require. No matter how difficult the journey became, no matter how much pain it caused, he had promised himself that he would see it through. He would complete the dream, for the sake of those who came before him and those who would follow. Unlike those who had walked this path alone, Naruto would have his friends and family by his side. Together, they would face the trials ahead, and together, they would build a future that no one could tear down. The road was long, the challenges many, but with their support, Naruto knew he would not waver. This was his destiny, one he would fulfill with strength, wisdom, and the unshakable bonds he had forged along the way. As Naruto's words settled in, the atmosphere on the roof shifted. The gang, accustomed to seeing leaders who hid behind facades or who spoke cryptically, found themselves struck by the straightforward nature of their new boss. They had met many ninja in the past, from the likes of Guy and Ibuki to others of lesser renown, but none had exuded the same level of confidence, raw power, and public presence that Naruto did. Naruto's demeanor was unlike any ninja they had encountered. The others were secretive, working in the shadows, operating with caution and subtlety. But Naruto was different. He was out in the open, fighting for the world to see. He was a ninja, yes, but he made no effort to hide it, and his strength was as much about his actions as it was about his words. His desire to walk in the light rather than linger in the shadows caught their attention. The realization dawned on Poison and Roxy simultaneously. This is much better than we thought, they thought. They had underestimated him, assuming he was another hidden figure like Ryu, someone who played by the rules of secrecy and isolation. But Naruto was proving to be far more than that. He was a force, and at only 16 years old, no known fighter in the world could rival his potential. "Boss, will you take care of us? How are you going to treat your servants?" Poison asked the most pressing question, the one that hung in the air like an unspoken truth. They needed to know where they stood with him. Would they be pawns, expendable and easily discarded, or would he value them as his trusted companions? Naruto looked at her with an unwavering gaze, his voice steady and resolute. "If you follow me properly, I will treat you like family. If someone beats you up, I will beat them up. If you are suffering, I will help you overcome it. I will not let you suffer, and I will give you the rewards you deserve. But if you break my rules, then you will get the punishment you deserve." For the first time since meeting him, Naruto released his killing intent. The sheer weight of it crashed down on them with an intensity that was almost suffocating. The air grew thick, heavy, as if the very presence of his intent could crush their spirits. Poison and Roxy felt their hearts race, their bodies instinctively recoiling under the pressure. The ground cracked beneath them as Naruto's chakra seeped into the atmosphere, leaving a lingering aura of death. The impact of his presence was overwhelming. If they were normal humans, their hearts might have burst under the strain, and the roof might have collapsed from the sheer force. The sensation was far worse than anything they had ever experienced, more suffocating than even Akuma's presence. For a moment, it felt like the entire world had come to a standstill, with only Naruto's overwhelming power dominating everything around them. "Understood, boss," Poison managed to say, her voice quiet, tinged with both fear and respect. She had no desire to experience that intensity again. It was a reminder of just how much power Naruto truly possessed. And here I thought he was a saint or something, but he was just a demon turned saint, she thought to herself, shaken yet even more drawn to his strength and leadership. Naruto smiled, his expression softening. "Don't worry, I will never show it to you again," he reassured them, his tone gentle. In an instant, he was between them, pulling both girls into a quick, comforting embrace. It was a stark contrast to the intense display of power he had just shown. The gesture felt almost casual, a way of demonstrating that despite the authority he commanded, he was still someone who could connect with them. "Now, spread out and gather information about tournaments or fights for me," Naruto instructed, his tone firm yet inviting. "If you have any other plans, or if you know people who we can recruit, let me know. We'll see what to do with them. I'm going to work on making your wrestling band interesting and famous. Abby and Hugo will follow me. The rest of you can go now and meet back here when I call you or at 5 p.m. sharp." He planted a kiss on each of their cheeks as a final gesture, and with a smile, let them go. The gang was taken aback by the sudden warmth of his actions. No one had expected Naruto to be so smooth, so touchy-feely. But it was clear now, Naruto wasn't just giving them orders, he was offering them a chance to become closer, to be part of something bigger. And it was up to them whether they would seize that opportunity or let it slip away. "Yes, boss," Roxy shouted enthusiastically, her voice ringing with newfound energy. The rest of the gang followed suit, quickly jumping off the roof and disappearing into the city below. They were eager to prove themselves, to show Naruto they were capable of delivering results. Naruto turned to Abby and Hugo, his gaze shifting to their gym. "Okay, let's go to your gym," he said, already thinking about the next steps in their plan. "I heard you guys have a place where you train and even hold matches. It's a shame about the bad history, but that's not a problem for us. Criminal history might have been bad for business, but I think we can turn it around." With that, the group moved out, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they left, Naruto's mind was already turning with ideas. He had a plan, and he wasn't about to let anything stand in the way of achieving his goals. With his gang behind him, and his confidence surging, the path ahead seemed clearer than ever. Thank for listening. Do hope you enjoy. If you guys enjoyed, if you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notifications, and also check out the other videos that have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.